Number 42 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Orders of June 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments before we get going for the benefits of our witnesses and members. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice of the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And pursuant to Standing Orders 108.3-I and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, the committee commences its study of the governments of Canada graduate scholarship and postdoctorate fellowship programs. We have three witnesses on the first panel that will have a 5-minute opening statement and then rounds of questions from the different respective parties here in the room. To start off our first 5 minutes, we will have from the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. I recognize Ben Lubb.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'll just keep this brief. It was just a comment to the committee. It just came out of last meeting, just from the occurrences of last meeting and the subcommittee meeting. And I'm just putting this on the record. I don't know what my colleagues think. They don't have to say anything about it now anyways if they don't want to. I just want it on the record. It's my own belief that my preference would be not to have subcommittee meetings to discuss the future business of the committee. Maybe for scheduling, perhaps, calendar type things, but for the details of what and when it will be studied, I think all the members of the committee should be allowed to be able to be part of that discussion. And I think through past meetings that we've had, it's worked out well. Now, I noticed today there's a few members who aren't here who are of our regular committee, and so we can have it for a later discussion, but I just wanted to put that on the record because I always like to hear everybody else's comments about what they're thinking, rather than being told what occurred and how we're going to do it. Okay? That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Lobb. Ozone, I'll let you have the floor quickly here, and we'll get into the witnesses here.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear the recommendation of my colleague because there are many members absent today, and because the chair is absent today, I believe we can delay this to another day.
That's what I picked up. So, well, as the vice chair and temporary in this role, we'll keep those comments on the record, and appreciate the different takes on how we should be running this committee and how we can best serve the constituents and the House of Commons through the important work that we do in this committee. So. Back to the witnesses we have. So I will give each witness 5 minutes to make opening statements, and then we'll have some rounds of questioning. First up from the Canadian Alliance of the Student Associations, we have Mackenzie Metcalf. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Honourable Chair, esteemed committee members, and fellow witnesses. I would like to begin my statement by acknowledging that we are meeting today on the territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. My name is Mackenzie Metcalf. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, or CASA. We are a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization that represents college, polytechnic, and university students from coast to coast to coast. And through our formal partnership with the Union Étudiante du Québec, we are a trusted national student voice, together representing 365,000 students across the country. First, I'd like to thank the committee for recognizing the importance of students through the study of Government of Canada's graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowships program. On Monday, May 1st, thousands of graduate students walked out of their university campuses across 45 schools in support of increased funding for tri-agency grants for graduate and postdoctoral researchers. Students want to study in Canada. They want to stay in Canada and build their careers here. Students want to contribute to Canada's research ecosystem. Canadian students use tri-agency awards as a point of entry into this research, but without increased investments in these awards, many students simply cannot afford to. Today, CASA is calling on the government to support Canadian research by increasing the award values, the number of awards available, and legislating specific student seats on each of these governing councils. The Government of Canada's graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowship programs drive the science and innovation that keeps Canada globally competitive. Without graduate student work, Canadian research and development would grind to a halt. Specifically, these programs in question today, provided through tri-agencies, provide government-funded research grants to grad students who help keep Canada at the forefront of industry. Though I myself am not a graduate student, I've heard from graduate students how important this funding is, as it often sets the precedent for Canada's top graduate researchers and what others in the field are paid for their work. These students engage in full-time work as researchers, and their scholarships act as their primary source of income to pay their rent, childcare costs, groceries, and other expenses. Often these students are restricted from having other jobs, as their attention is, and should be, completely focused on their research. But even with the tremendous value that these scholars bring to Canada, the government funding provided for the most prestigious graduate awards amounts to less than minimum wage in many parts of the country. Graduate award values for Canada's tri-agencies have not changed since 2003, despite inflation rising 48% during this time. And with the current value of these awards, we have researchers aspiring to study beyond Canada's borders, not because they want to, but because they have no other choice. Other countries are taking action to equip their scientists with the funds for cutting-edge research. The USA's CHIPS Act more than doubled their National Science Fund commitment over a period of 5 years and increased their graduate research fellowships by 50%. Every student researcher that chooses to study abroad to pursue better research funding in the United States, Europe, or elsewhere is a lost future innovator, entrepreneur, or future Canadian research chair. And let me be clear, this is a government that has made many investments in students, removing the interest on Canada's student loans, increasing grants for Canada student grants, along with project-specific investments in the sciences and tri-councils in previous budgets. But even the previous investments in Canadian research have not trickled down to the pockets of graduate researchers who have been making the same wage since 2003. Good science requires the best scientists, and the best scientists deserve to be paid an equitable living wage for their cutting-edge research. This brings me to the end of my remarks, but I wish to briefly reiterate our recommendations. First, to increase the amount of funding for Government of Canada's graduate scholarship and postdoctoral fellowship programs to compensate students for their work. Second, to simultaneously double the number of awards given out through these programs. And third, to legislate a reserved student seat on each of the governing councils to ensure that student perspectives are always taken into account in future tri-agency decisions. On behalf of our members at CASA, I thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Now we're going to move on to online with the Canadian Federation of Students. We have Hilary Hennessy. The floor is yours, Hilary, for 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I come to you from Newfoundland and Labrador. The island of Newfoundland is the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Nitassinan, the Innu of Nunavut, and the Innu of Nunavut. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm very new to this role, but I am the campaigns commissioner for the National Graduate Student Caucus, representing all graduate students across Canada. I do have a few things I would like to raise today, such as the poverty that students are facing. So 71% of graduate students live below the poverty line, and 1 in 3 of graduate students live on less than $1,250 a month. This is incredibly low and is creating a lot of struggle and barriers for students in completing their research and also creating a life for themselves. On May 1st, like Mackenzie has said, thousands of graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, faculty, staff, and community supporters across Canada walked out of their academic institutions to demand increased federal investments in scholarship, fellowships, and grants to support increased pay for graduate students and postdoctors. Fellowships. But although I am not an international student, I do want to recommend that it is incredibly important that we create funding, substantial funding, to allow graduate students to pursue their studies without the stress of being able to afford their daily life. A lot of students do not have access to federal and provincial funding, and we would like to see them have access to this. So our recommendations from Section 4 of our pre-budget submission. We want to extend eligibility for Canada student grants to graduate students, estimately $25 million per year. Explore the creation of dedicated research fellowships for Indigenous and international students. As I said, there are not adequate. So we would like to see approximately $30 million per year associated to this. We would like to increase the value of graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellows awarded by the Tri-Council Agency by 48% to match inflation since 2003, especially the postgraduate scholarships. We would like to see index all award values to the customer price index, which will ensure awards are internationally competitive and increase with the costs of living. Double the number of postdoctoral fellowships awarded by Tri-Council cost, $51 million in 2003. We would like to see that doubled. A 50% increase in the number of graduate scholarships awarded by the Tri-Council. We would like to see that increased as well. It has been communicated to me that there was no mention of graduate students in the last budget, specifically research or science. As government has been vocally supportive of this research and of research in general, we are looking for the government to action ways that we can increase research in Canada and create a better experience for students. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to answering your questions as well.
Thank you as well for your testimony. Now moving on for the final witness for this panel, we have from the Quebec Student Union, Sammy Jane, the president of the Quebec Student Union. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to thank the committee for the invitation. I'm Sammy Jane Tremblay, and I'm the president of the Quebec Student Union. We represent over 91,000 university students in Quebec, including 25,000 graduate students. We also partner with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. Together, we represent more than 365,000 university students across Canada. We support the Support Our Science program, and on May 1st, we marched alongside our underfunded students. As you know, there has been no increase in scholarship investments since 2003. And yet, without those, it is impossible for us to continue doing what we do. Currently, Canada is the only G7 nation that reduced its research and development investment. Other countries understood that this is a priority and established ambitious targets. In the Bouchard report, this report showed that Germany wants to increase its research investment to 3.5% of its GDP, while Finland wants to increase it to 4% of its GDP. Currently, Canada's investment is only at 1.6% of its GDP. This is not enough to compete on the international stage. The Bouchard report states this well. Research funding has not followed the financial pressures that have existed for the past 20 years. On top of international competition, there is also a growth in the size and the activities of research activities. According to the Bank of Canada, inflation was increased by 50% between 2003 and 2023. However, the value of scholarships did not increase. The number of scholarships granted should also increase in order to support the next generation of scientists. The hour is dire. Canada is behind when it comes to research, science, and innovation, and does not think that this issue is a priority when it should. We are talking about the future of our country. By not investing on the next generation, Canada is encouraging a brain drain, all while there is a shortage of qualified labor. In order to face the constant pressures, the government needs to implement the Bouchard report and to invest in research and development. They should not only increase the amount provided, but also to increase funding for graduate students. Another issue has been exposed by the NALO report that has been drafted in 2017. The duration of scholarships are not aligned with the duration of studies. many scholarships last 1 year while master's programs last 2 years. And that is a problematic situation because we are not helping students at the end of their studies when they need it. And therefore, students need to find alternative funding measures. Meanwhile, in Quebec, master's programs are funded for over 2 years, whereas PhD programs are funded for 4 years. It's a much more realistic program. It is important that university students can explain their perspective. Currently, there are no student seats on the governing councils of the funding agencies. Meanwhile, that is not the case for Quebec. In Quebec, there are seats on the governing councils of the Quebec research funding programs. And we ask the federal government to follow Quebec's example. This will allow students to express its concerns. I'd like to end by saying that graduate students contribute a lot to society, and our future will be necessary by them. I'd like to thank you, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much for that testimony. Now we'll open up the rounds of questioning. This will be the 6-minute round, starting off from the Conservatives. MP Mazer.
Chair, thank you. This is for coming out here today. With this, we have some out of control inflationary spending and out of control spending as well, and it's causing inflation, I guess. Those on fixed and lower incomes are being particularly hit, and especially students, and they are finding it difficult to live. After 8 years of this government, there's some startling statistics that I do want to share with you. Rent has doubled. Students are now paying 25% more for housing than the average Canadian renter. We've heard stories of students living in homeless shelters. Inflation has reached 40-year high last year. Interest costs have increased to a 15-year high. 40% of the undergraduate students and 50% of the graduate students say they are worried of running out of food. Food bank use on campus is reaching new highs. The price of food is becoming unaffordable, and we continue to see more Canadians skipping meals. So this is for all three of you, and you'll be able to elaborate here. So not only has this government not increased scholarships and fellowship programs, but the cost of living is also out of control. Can you describe how this funding freeze and the increase in cost of living has impacted the students you represent? And I guess, Ms. Tremblay, we can start with you, because you are first.
Yes, this freeze had heavy impacts on students. Currently, the value of scholarships are not harmonized. The duration of the funding is also not harmonized. This creates disparities. The amounts can go anywhere between $17,500 to $35,000. Some scholarships also provide up to $50,000. We suggest the decrease of the $50,000 scholarships, the super scholarships, such as the Vanier scholarships, that provide $50,000 over the course of 3 years. We recommend those to be reduced to $35,000 to fund more students and to help more students face the challenges that you mentioned and to reduce the precarity of student services.
Ms. Metcalf, before, are you aware of the difference? We talked about the G7 compared to any other countries, like the difference between, say, the U.S. in scholarships and what they're actually getting paid. We've been asking for an increase of funding, but what is the actual dollar amount we're talking about, the difference if you went and took your postdoc down in the States versus Canada here? What does that difference look like?
Yes. So, with the recent investment that they had in the United States with the CHIPS Act, their graduate fellowships earn around $50,000 a year Canadian, compared to the $17,500 for the Canadian master's funding that are provided as an equivalent. And then to address your previous question at the beginning, I work with students every single day from coast to coast to coast, and for the past 3 years, the number one thing that I've been hearing from Vancouver Island all the way to the East Coast is that affordability is the number one concern that students have been feeling. We have also heard similar concerns of students accessing food banks at higher rates, and really being concerned about affording the cost of their education. There has been investments in the sciences, specifically in the 2018 budget, but unfortunately, that money hasn't trickled down to graduate students' values who are still living off the same amount that they were in 2003.
I think that's the fundamental problem, right? Instead of focusing on the students, and the funding does not allow for, here's what we have to pay, like a living wage almost, to make sure that the students are looked after, because they're going to actually do the work. And who we got down there? Sorry, on the screen. Ms. Hennessy, do you have anything
Hi.
to add?
Yes, I definitely do. You raised some great points that need to be addressed, in my opinion. Students are working a lot of hours to try to make a living for themselves and afford the cost of living, because inflation has made the cost of everything so high. These low wages that we're seeing in scholarships and grants are keeping these individuals in precarious financial positions, which are preventing students from really dedicating their time and effort to their studies. We're seeing students, as mentioned by the other panelists here today, we're seeing them reach out to external resources to try and get support, which usually ends up not being successful for them. There's not enough adequate social supports for students, so we're leaving them in very hard positions that is taking away from their research and from their experience as a graduate student. I believe it's important to say as well that 64% of students, and this data comes from our recent survey, say that the cost of tuition and student debt that they're facing is negatively impacting their mental health. So there's a lot of stress, I guess, associated with being a graduate student, which is excluding a lot of people from pursuing graduate studies and preventing them from contributing to research and contributing to our economy in this way. So that's all I have to say, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Just briefly, you mentioned about the budget. That was a budget ask on the pre-consultations. Are you aware that there was no mention and no budget increase for graduates in this last budget?
Yes, I am aware that there was no increase.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next round of question from MP Lazon. You have, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by thanking the witnesses for their speech. We hear you. All three panelists are mentioning the same things. You have talked about the need to increase budgets that have been frozen since 2003. You also spoke about the granting systems. I have a question for Ms. Tremblay. You talked about harmonized funding. You also suggested the modification of the super scholarships. Do you believe that the committee needs to focus on the system, on the distribution of the values of the scholarships, amongst many other things? Do we need to talk about both at the same time? I believe we do need to speak about both at the same time. When we talk about research funding, we need to talk about how the three funding agencies provide these fundings. The CIHR provide scholarships over 4 years, and the other agencies only provide them over the course of 3 years. The SSHRC provides $20,000 scholarships, whereas others provide $35,000 scholarships. So harmonization is needed in order to make sure that all students are funded at the same level. You talk about the importance about having a student member being part of the governance council. Can you talk about these kind of councils? Ms. Mackenzie, maybe we can talk about the spread of these values of scholarships.
Thank you. Sorry, the translation is just catching up. So one of the recommendations that we are putting forward today is asking the government to legislate a student seat on these tri-councils. This is something that we think will be a little bit of a proactive measure so that students' concerns and really experiences on the ground as researchers can be taken into account proactively as these tri-councils make decisions. Obviously, the award amounts haven't been increased since 2003, and we think having a student mandated around that table will help prevent challenges like this in the future. And I'll note, of these 19 seats for the councils, they're not always filled. We have spoken with different people in the appointments office about different processes. So we definitely think the government is hearing us on this, but we would like to see it in legislation so that problems like this don't arise again.
Okay, so I have a last question for Madame Hennessy. Vous avez parlé du...
You talked about students who do not have access to scholarships. You said that there is a disparity, that some foreign students that face hardships and who cannot obtain a certain level of flexibility. According to your experiences and from what you hear, how can the current scholarships be improved to be more flexible and in order to meet the needs of today's students compared to the students of 20 years ago?
Great question. I'd be happy to elaborate. I think that it's important, and again, I really want to acknowledge that I'm not an international student, but I am voicing the concerns that I have heard from international graduate students. So I think we'd be able to increase the available grants and scholarship opportunities by making it available to all and not just Canadian citizens or people who have permanent residence. These are creating barriers for students who are coming into our country to pursue studies who are international students and do not have this recognition of PR or citizenship. So just breaking down those barriers, those structural barriers, will create more access to funding and access to postgraduate studies.
Merci de nous avoir...
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank you for talking about mental health. People do not talk about this issue enough. Can you speak more about the worries of your members, as well as the resources that are available to them? Many students are under distress because of underfunding.
Yes, students are under distress because our social supports here in Canada are underfunded. Specifically in my province, they are very underfunded. I'm in Newfoundland and Labrador, as mentioned earlier, but the wait lists as well are so high for students to get counseling, so that creates barriers. There's not enough counselors. The systems within each university is not effective. We're seeing people not being able to really connect with their counselors, especially people who are racialized or Indigenous, because there's a lack of BIPOC counselors that are available to students. We're seeing a lot here, and I think the main financial or mental burden on students is the financial stress that they are going through because they're unable to afford their education without working so hard, and being able to get this funding would be life-changing for them in my perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Now on to the next member of parliament. We have from the bloc, MP Lemire.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the leadership of my colleague Maxime Blanchet-Jonca for bringing forward this issue. But this cannot be done without the help of student associations. As a former member of a student union, I salute your work. Even when we look at reports, whether it's the Naylor report or the Bouchard report, we can see that there has been a severe amount of underfunding. But I believe there is one recommendation that englobes all of them, and that's the issue of psychological health. I want to hear your opinions on this. You talk about a new $500 million fund over the course of 4 years to provide professional mental health services. Is underfunding also causing this?
Merci d'ailleurs pour la question. L'UEC a fait une étude sur la...
L'UEC provided a research on mental health of students. We talked to thousands of students, and the results are dire. Over 50% of students show a high level of distress compared to 20% within the Quebec general public. We see the impacts of financial precarity on the emotions and on the fatigue of students. It also causes more depressive symptoms, especially amongst graduate students. So I believe that by increasing funding to graduate students, we mitigate the risks related to psychological health. A lot of people like to say the fact that students live an easy life, but I do not like to hear this. People like to say that they have a lot of money and all they need to do is to go deeper into debt because they have their whole life to pay off this debt. We hear this argument over and over again. When it comes to psychological health, we often talk about, let's talk about COVID. Now that we're out of the pandemic, do you believe that this issue still exists today? Yes, psychological health is still very important, and we still need to take this into consideration. We need to provide more mental health support services. A lot of studies were made before the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we see that the mental health of students have been heavily impacted. And I'd like to go back on something you just spoke about earlier, that is the arguments that students can pay off their student debt later. But graduate students need to be seen as workers. They are researchers. They are doing full-time research, and they're contributing to our country's innovation. And they should be paid like other countries. Yes, people often see students as cheap labor. The university system also contributes to this because they often hire students to do work while the professors take the credit, but the students lay the groundwork. Are these optimal solutions? Are students adequately compensated? No. A lot of students are not funded. The granting agencies in the federal level and in provinces do not fund all students, and often it is the professors who must provide a salary to their researchers. And there is a direct link between funding and the obtention of a diploma. And that is the University of Montreal that published a report that shows that students that receive funding have a higher chance of graduating. When we look at the spread of scholarships and the funding towards fundamental sciences versus applied sciences, I also think about social sciences. I think that social sciences are often neglected. Do you think that the federal government is doing enough when it comes to providing scholarships for humanities? All three sectors need to be funded, whether it is health sciences or social sciences, because there can be a lot of innovations in all these sectors. It is also important to think about intersectionality. The Bouchard report talks about this. Often, many professors or students may fall between the cracks when they make grant applications because interdisciplinarity is a much more topic of our time. People might do a research project in humanities, but they have to work with health sciences. So it is important to consider that all these domains can crisscross. I'm thinking about the official announcement of the federal government and the results on the ground and how they affect psychological health and how they affect the labor market. What is the cost of underfunding for society?
Submit a written.
I have 15 seconds left. I believe she has the time to answer.
For
Monsieur le
the
Président, je conteste.
I have 15 seconds. I believe we can look at the minutes.
has informed me that we are out of time. Now, moving on to the next round of questionings, we have MP Cannings for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start with Ms. Hennessy, if only because when I was a grad student, I went to Memorial University of Newfoundland in the mid-'70s, many, many years ago. What? The 1970s? Has there been any other 70s? And at that time, I had an NRC scholarship. I predate NSERC, in fact. There was no NSERC even then. And I had $7,500 a year. It was enough money to live comfortably. And that, of course, went up gradually until 2003 to $17,500, and it stayed the same since then, as we've heard here today, through several governments, a Liberal government, a Conservative government, and another Liberal government. So nothing has been done for the last 20 years. And it's also been mentioned here that not all grad students live off these scholarships. In fact, it's a minority of grad students. The majority are being paid by their profs who are getting money through the tri-councils. And I just wanted you to maybe explain the importance of also not only raising the grad student scholarships by 48%, but by raising the amounts given to the through the tri-councils to investigators who can then pay the majority of these grad students.
Yes, I think you raised some great points, and it's great to see an alumni with us today. But yes, students are not being paid appropriately. They are not all students receive funding. I was very lucky to receive funding, but a lot of other students in my faculty do not, and I know a lot of other students across Canada do not have these funding. So it is important to ensure that our students are funded properly so that they can contribute to research and do the work for the future. As you mentioned, you were a student in the 1970s. A lot has changed since then. And to have, I guess, funding match that change in our society would be great because it would allow students to contribute solely to their research and not have to do a million things in the background to afford the cost of living and their education.
Right. Well, thank you. And I'm going to turn now to Ms. Metcalf to talk about some of those changes. I know since 1975, the percentage of university budgets that have come from the government has gone down from 75% to somewhere in the 40% range. So, and that difference has been made up predominantly with raising tuition rates. So this is, another general stress on students, the rising tuition rates that has been caused directly by a decrease in government funding. Can you, either of you, I don't know, whatever light goes on.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And this does raise a really important concern around affordability in post-secondary education. There has been a decrease in government funding to universities over the last couple of decades, and students have been increasingly paying higher tuitions. And also importantly, international students have been paying significantly higher tuitions as well, because very often they're unregulated by the government, where domestic students have legislated caps in their provinces for what they can pay for tuition. With the increases in tuition, the fact that students often enter the housing market at the going rate, so they pay higher costs for housing, students really are having an affordability crunch, and that goes for undergraduate students as well as the graduate students that we're talking about today. And one of the reasons that we are focusing specifically on the graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowships is because these awards are seen as like the benchmark and the most prestigious awards that you can get as a student in Canada. So it's really difficult for students who are then hired under professors or by their universities to advocate to be paid more money. So we really think that this is an example where a rising tide will lift all boats, and that if these scholarships are increased, other students will then benefit from that investment as well.
Okay, and I've also heard data that show that 38% of students that graduate with a PhD here in Canada, 38% of those people go outside Canada for their postdoctoral fellowships, partly because of the poor funding here. And, you know, when you do some quick back-of-the-envelope math, that is a $640 million loss every year in, you know, we have spent all that money in educating these people, and they go abroad, and many of them don't come back because they find much greener pastures in the United States or elsewhere. Just wonder if you could, either of you, comment on that.
Happy to comment on that, and I will say that this issue is specifically difficult to quantify, but we did find a 2016 survey that found 47% of early career health research considered moving abroad, and since then conditions have worsened. According to the OECD, Canada is second last in the G7 for investment in research and development by percentage of GDP. And what's also important to note is that these graduate students and postdoctoral researchers do conduct research at post-secondary education and help with Canada's prestige and reputation in terms of academia. But 75% of these PhD students do end up in industry. These are the people that fight or create the challenges or create the solutions to the challenges, like fighting climate change, like tackling Canada's housing crisis, and we need these people in research and in private industry to tackle the challenges that we're going to face as a country. And if they are going elsewhere, other countries will benefit from the time and the effort that Canada put in educating these scientists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now moving on to our 5-minute round, we have from the Conservatives, MP Soroka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today. We've already talked a lot. We definitely know there's lack of funding in the province or in the country. That's not the issue here. I'm just more concerned about, like you, Ms. Hennis or Metcalf, you had just brought up how almost 50% or probably now 50% of our graduate students are leaving the country in that. Would you happen to know as well how much of a factor that is having on our research, of how much less research is potentially being done, and then that's how it's affecting our GDP as well?
Unfortunately, I don't have the data to answer that question right now, but I'd be happy to follow up with the committee clerk afterwards.
If you could get that information, that would be fantastic for us. Ms. Tremblay, you had said that the province of Quebec does support their students to a greater degree. Is this because of the French language and there might not be as many opportunities for French-speaking Canadians outside of Quebec and that's why they do it? Or is it just that they treat their students much better than the rest of Canada?
I believe that example, Quebec is an example to follow. In the past provincial budget, we saw investments to increase scholarships through the Quebec Research Fund. The scholarships have been increased by $2,500 at the master's level and $4,000 at the PhD level. So I believe that Quebec is an example to follow. It should be the other way around. but right now I ask Canada to follow Quebec's example.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Ms. Hennessy, you had mentioned there with international students coming in. Do you have any data to show how many of the international students that either get their master's or doctorate here actually stay in Canada, or they don't because there's lack of funding? Do you have any information on that?
I want to answer that question with statistics, so I will follow up with the committee clerk to ensure that you have the information needed.
As well as then, is it possible to find out when it comes to whether they're getting their master's or their doctorate, the comparison of how, I don't want to say poorly Canadians fund the students compared to other countries? Is that possible to get that kind of information as well? Do a comparison between the different countries?
It could be, so I will follow up with the committee clerk on all that I can gather for you. Thank you.
The other member had that kind of information, I'd appreciate that as well. Mr. Metcalf?
Thank you. I have some of this information on hand, specifically about the recent investment that the United States did through their CHIPS Act. They actually increased the number of equivalent graduate scholarships in the United States by 50%, and those graduate researchers make the equivalent of $50,000 a year Canadian compared to the $17,500 for the Canada Master's funding.
I do know a little bit more about the American program because I unfortunately have to admit my nephew is now at Michigan State University, and the big thing was the amount of money that he got paid for a full scholarship to go there. Now he's into his postdoctorate, and he got a significant increase compared to being in Canada. So I can honestly say that the odds of him coming back to Canada now are almost slim to zero. So that's one of the things that we're losing our brain drain, as well as then what are we losing in education? What are we losing in, like you talked about, our commercial side? What kind of products could we create better or more innovative, and how much are we losing that way? So I'm hoping that you can supply that information. When it comes to other funding, though, do you feel that we're losing students and they're not going elsewhere, that they're actually just not getting the education? Do you have any information on that?
Sorry, can you clarify? Do you mean like undergraduate students?
Yeah, well, any graduate student that is going for a doctorate or a master's degree, that there are not enough funding available, so they're not actually completing that, and they're just staying as a graduate student. Do you have any information that way?
I don't have any offhand, but I do have the statistic that in 2016, a survey found 47% of early career health researchers have seriously considered leaving the country because of financial concerns to pursue their education elsewhere. This is something that we've been hearing, and I recommend that you ask this question specifically to Sarah from the Support Our Science movement. She's testifying next week, and she has been a great champion for collecting the stories of these graduate students in Canada, highlighting the experiences that they've been having, the struggles about securing funding, and the considerations that they have made while trying to pursue their research in Canada.
Probably a great question for her in the future, but I just thought that today I'm just concerned that how many students we could get better educated, but they just financially can't afford to move on to the next step. So that is a big factor. That's it for me. Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you to the witnesses.
All right, moving on to MP Collins for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for all the witnesses for appearing today, virtually and in person. First and foremost, I think what I'll do is I'll cede 15 seconds to my friend across the table for Madame Tremblay to answer the questions. If you want to answer that, then I'd give you that 15 seconds at this point in time to answer that question.
So, thanks to the support, students can fully focus on their studies in the area of study. That is not true. Students who receive scholarship cannot fully concentrate on their studies because the amounts are not enough. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ms. Metcalf, I'll start with you in terms of some of your recommendations. I think you and the other two witnesses have raised some consistent themes here in terms of lack of funding support since 2003, which I think would be some constructive criticism for both governments that have served since that time. And so I think the recommendations that you, Ms. Tremblay and Ms. Hennessy have provided here today will be consistent themes that we hear from other witnesses. One of the things that I'm looking for from some of the witnesses and recommendations that you might have in mind relate to other supports that we could provide, apart from increased scholarship funding, increased financial support for bursaries and fellowships. You know, I'm looking at housing. You referenced housing twice, once in your opening and once in a response. And you know, it's a shared responsibility, I think, between all three levels of government. Municipalities, provinces, and the federal government, I think, have a shared obligation to provide housing supports. To know that, as Ms. Hennessy pointed out earlier, that 71% of postgraduate students live below the poverty line, I think is a disturbing figure. And so, you know, I'm interested in looking at how the federal government can provide financial support through housing incentives or initiatives. Our national housing strategy currently provides funds to universities through the National Co-Investment Fund as well as the Rental Construction Financing Initiative. However, we don't have a specific line for post-secondary institutions in our budget, and I think there should be one for the National Housing Strategy to assist the debt that students are taking on, with the debt that students are taking on. And so your thoughts on that in terms of providing other forms of support at the federal level to assist with some of the, you know, costs that not just students are experiencing, but all others across the country.
Thank you for the question. Very timely. I will say that CASA recently finished authoring a policy paper on this subject that's going to be released in the next couple of months, so I'd be happy to share that with you once it's ready. But the crux of our recommendations actually focus around data collection because students are not a recognized class of renters in a lot of the data that we have. There are actually some private organizations, specifically, or not private, non-government organizations, specifically UTIL in Quebec, that have done national student surveys to fill this gap, but it's difficult as a student organization to make these recommendations when there isn't consistent data from the government to help us identify trends. But I will say that consistent funding through the Canada Student Grants Program is something that students are very concerned about and something that is top of mind. This is a very important program that specifically targets low and middle income Canadians in their access to post-secondary education and does include a calculation for housing. So ensuring that that program is consistently funded for those students and data so that we can help fill some of the other gaps would be the two recommendations I can provide to you today.
Thanks very much. Ms. Hennessy, can I ask you the same as it relates to housing supports for postgrad students?
Yes, for sure. Thank you for the question. I think that if we adequately support graduate students through funding, grants, scholarships, I believe that we'd be able to alleviate a lot of the stress that comes hand in hand with housing and counseling, for example, and not having mental health support and access to that. So again, if students were funded properly, they'd be able to have less financial stress and be able to afford the cost of living, such as rent, such as all the utilities that come along with that, such as groceries. So adequately funding students in one aspect could alleviate all the other external factors.
Thank you both for the answers. Mr. Chair, I think I'm out of time at this point. You're at 11 seconds. That's fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to our witnesses. We are now at 12 o'clock, so we will be switching over to the next panel.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask the Bloc and the NDP to be able to have their 2.5 minutes, please.
We are at the 12-minute mark. We were supposed to stop at 11:55 as per schedule, so we're already 5 minutes over. You will have an opportunity.
You started late, Mr. Chair, and I believe in fairness of the Bloc because it's not our fault if you started the meeting late.
All right. No, we will be wrapping up on this panel, and I'd like to thank the witnesses once again for being here today. Take care. We now stand suspended for a couple minutes to make sure all our next witnesses are ready to go.
I just
motion adopted by a committee on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. The committee resumes its study on the Government of Canada's graduate scholarships and postdoctorate fellowship programs. We have our next panel of witnesses that will be provided with a 5-minute opening round of statements and then rounds of questioning to follow. First up, for the first round of opening comments, we have Sebastian Paquette. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello? Can I start? Yes? Hello, everyone. I am Sébastien Paquette. I'm here on behalf of the Quebec Association of Research Personnel, the APRQ. We want to reduce the precarity of research personnel and recognize the importance of their contributions to university research across the country. I happily accepted today's invitation in order to talk about postdoctoral researchers. Please note that I no longer use the word intern because this word is considered demeaning to our members. The word intern has often been used to excuse bad working conditions and does not recognize them as highly qualified research staff. What does a postdoctoral researcher do in their day-to-day life? They lead one or several research projects, whether they are university projects or a project with a private sector partner. When they conduct their research, they supervise students at the graduate level. In certain labs, students rely on postdocs way much more than professors. Postdoc researchers are often the ones who write the most amount of scientific articles and often help professors write grant applications that are essential to their survival. Their work is very similar to professional researchers. They are essential to our labs. And that is why a lot of professors cannot work if it was not for these people, even though that postdoc status has only existed since the 90s. Whether it is through funding agencies or funding through professors that hired them, researchers live in difficult situations. This difficult situation is because of their working conditions. There's a chronic underfunding. The amount of scholarships currently do not allow postdocs to have a competitive salary compared to the private sector or compared to universities abroad. If it weren't for the unionization of postdoc researchers, they would probably be better off to work in a minimum wage job. Postdoc researcher compensation is currently not high enough to attract foreign talent. When an older colleague told me about the scholarship they received in 1996, I realized that this did not keep pace with inflation, even before the record high inflation that we've seen the past 2 years. Scholarships that become taxable income vary between $40,000 to $80,000 per year, and very few receive $80,000. Additionally, they need to spend a lot of this income to buy equipment, which reduces their income by 25%. Unfortunately, the person who receives this scholarship often only learns about this at the beginning of their work. Postdoc researchers also work long hours. This is related to the fact that they face precariousness and the fact that they need to build credentials early in their career. The increase of minimum salaries and of scholarships is the best way to ensure that the researchers are properly compensated. university success would not be possible without the contribution of postdocs. And these people should not live in precariousness. The collective agreements negotiated by unions led to minimum salaries for postdocs. This means that in many cases, professors hire postdocs. But a lot of the funding is not sufficient, and not all postdoc researchers have union protection. A gap needs to be filled. And the fact that this has not reached minimum wage means that postdocs are not compensated enough. I therefore ask that there should be a massive amount of investment increased for postdocs, while making sure that each project also receives increased funding. Postdoc associations request decent working conditions that are aligned with their essential contribution to science and to the training of future professionals. This will also allow Canadian universities to be more competitive compared to other countries, and will also allow Canada to retain its highly skilled labor.
Much for that. Moving on to the next witness, we have Mr. Boulanger for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for having invited me. I am the Director of Graduate Studies and Student Success at the Institut National de la Recherche Scientifique, the National Institute for Scientific Research, INRS, in Quebec. It is a university institution dedicated exclusively to research and graduate training. It is one of the 10 institutions that make up the Réseau de l'Université du Québec, Quebec University Network. And today I am here in my capacity as the representative of the Canadian Association for Graduate Studies. It is Canada's national association that promotes excellence in graduate education and research. Our members include more than 60 Canadian universities and research institutes around Canada, and there are many stakeholders with an interest in graduate education. The CASGs would like to recognize that the significant investments of the federal government in research institutions in the past and now have contributed significantly to a culture of research in Canada. However, the association continues to ask that the 3 granting agencies obtain from the federal government the means needed to increase the amounts of scholarships and research grants. The members of the association were expecting a substantial increase in graduate and postdoc grants and research funding. They were therefore very disappointed by the 2023 federal budget because there's a lack of investment in the research ecosystem in Canada. So despite a number of calls to action sent out by researchers and student associations in recent years, and going against the recommendations of its own advisory council on the funds needed to support research, the federal government decided to ignore in its 2023 budget Canadian students for postgrad and postdoc researchers and the higher education community in general. The funding provided by the federal government to students has been stagnating for over 20 years. Since 2023, there has been no increase, or virtually no increase, in the value of master's and doctoral scholarships, and the cost of living has been rising. And so now the amount in scholarships is at or under the poverty line established by the federal government itself, and that leads to terrible consequences. There are 3,000 young researchers in the system now that are among the most talented in Canada who are living under the poverty line. An in-depth study from 2016 at the University of Montreal showed that financial insecurity contributed to alarming rates of mental health problems in university students, particularly high rates of mental illness, drug dependency, etc. In order to solve the critical problems linked to underfunding of research, the CASG recommends 3 solutions. First, increase the number of scholarships provided to students. Second, to increase significantly the value of scholarships for excellence in research, and also significantly increase the value of research grants so that professors can also provide more support to students from those grants. In conclusion, the members of my association are convinced that it's important to fund studies more so that there can be benefits for all Canadians. We need a next generation of high-level scientists and researchers, and this is incredibly important for the fair and sustainable development of this country. It is essential for students who are at the master's, doctoral, and postdoc level. We're talking about the scientists of tomorrow, and they must be supported in a decent way. I'd like to finish this by quoting the Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, who in October 2022 answered the petition that was tabled at the House of Commons on the funding of graduate studies. The Government of Canada recognizes the importance of investing in post-secondary education and the essential role that federal grants play in that ecosystem to help them progress through their career and to improve their financial security and independence. But I would tell the Minister today, and I'm saying this to you as well, we agree, but now it is time to act. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Now on to our last.
Thank you. Dear members of the committee, hello. It is my pleasure to speak in front of you today. I'd like to start by recognizing that we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for their speeches. I am Cynthia Mubia-Biage. I am the president of the Laval University Union of Students and Postdoctoral Workers. I am also a PhD student in epidemiology. I have personal experience with the Government of Canada's graduate scholarship programs. I'd like to thank the committee for tabling today's motion because it is a particularly relevant motion in today's high inflation environment. Many vulnerable populations are affected by this inflation, including graduate students and postdoc students. Today, I will talk about the impact of scholarships on graduate students and postdoc fellows. So even though the federal government provides hundreds of millions of dollars in graduate scholarships, this amount is not enough. The life conditions of students are precarious. Here's an example. Being a master's or doctoral student means that you have to do full-time research for more than 40 hours per week and work over weekends. In order to meet their needs, many students combine several contracts. This can really exhaust them and maybe even lead them to fail school because graduate programs require a lot of publications to succeed. This also affects study-family balance as well as the student's psychological health. According to some research, 58% of university students are facing mental health distress. Since 2003, the value of federal scholarships have remained unchanged. That is around $70,500 for master's levels and $35,000 for PhD programs. In Canada, the after-tax low-income cutoff amount for a single person living in a city with more than 500,000 people is $22,060. Because most universities are located in large cities, the current amounts of scholarships do not allow students to have an adequate standard of living. Many doctoral students also need to take care of families, so the $35,000, which first seems high, does not meet their needs. The purpose of these scholarships is to promote excellence by supporting students over the course of their research careers and to allow them to enjoy high-quality training. Their work has impacts across society, whether it is by understanding the development of disease, the responsible use of energy, or health care systems. Yet, the current values of the scholarships makes one wonder if the objectives have been met. Additionally, foreign students represent more than 30% of graduate students in Canadian universities and contribute to our national prosperity, but they do not have access to these scholarships. Additionally, the funding agencies in health, in science, in engineering, and in social sciences have very difficult to understand systems. In fact, the quota distribution system is not adequately understood. There are also issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When it comes to postdoctoral scholarships, the amounts vary from competition to competition. When it comes to the NSERC scholarships, these can go about $45,000 per year, where the Banting scholarships can go around $70,000 per year. This all contributes to the impoverishment of postdoc researchers. Postdocs should be considered highly skilled labor because of their training and their ability to direct research. But the amounts provided does not reflect this, because they are below entry-level jobs for PhD students in Canada. Therefore, it is important to harmonize the amounts provided by competitions as well as plan for a real increase in scholarships. So I support today's motion in order to study the Government of Canada's graduate scholarship and postdoctoral fellowships, and I ask the government to increase them. Thank you.
Now we'll have some rounds of questioning. Opening up for the 6-minute round, we have MP Lobb.
Very much, Mr. Tucker. First question is to Mr. Belanger. Is there a number? Is there a number, like a financial dollar, that ask that you'd say, if there was this many more dollars to the council granting system, that would fix the problem? Is amongst all your colleagues from province to province, is there an agreed upon number there?
Look, the value of scholarships have not increased in 20 years. It is around $28,000. So there's the Canada graduate scholarship that is $35,000. But on average, it is still around $20,000.
You need $500 million, you need $10. What's the number?
We need to study this. But I want to say that $20,000 in the year 2000 is now worth $35,000 today. So I believe that that value should be corrected to $35,000. And then the amount needs to be indexed. When we establish a fixed amount, we create inequity between the different cohorts. Some are studying below the poverty line, and others will be benefiting from the correction when that correction arrives. So I asked the federal parliament to examine the possibility of correcting the scholarships and then to implement an indexation system in order to avoid the same situation happening in a few decades.
Mention to the fiscal disparity that is experienced by the research people and postdoctorate fellows, etc. But I find it odd, and it's not a criticism of you, but I find it odd with all those billions of dollars of annual budget at these universities, they can't come to the federal government and say, we need another $1 billion to make this happen. Is that not a little odd to you?
We are confusing two things, with all due respect. You're talking about how universities work, and you're talking about the direct support provided to students, which is evolving. In my opinion, these are two different things.
There's 2,000 of these such research and postdoctorate fellows across the country, and you've got all these universities. Wouldn't they know it's an issue? Wouldn't they be able to work together? They already have all these associations, and say, yes, Ms. Freeland, we need $500 million more annual dollars. Because I know the study, and it's a good study here, but we all know it's more. We know how much more, but we don't know the total.
Alors, la position de l'association.
Our position is very simple. We want to increase the value of scholarships and index it to inflation. That should have been done 25 years ago. We also want more research funding to professors to allow professors to provide adequate financial support to the students that they supervise. Of course, if the federal government wants to close these councils and to redirect all that money to all universities, then we can talk about that later. But currently, funding is not sent directly to universities, but rather to funding agencies.
And I always wonder when we look at these universities, and I don't begrudge anybody of the higher ups at these universities to make their big wages. I don't begrudge them, whatever they want to make. But my question is, I'm sure amongst your colleagues, you must wonder, you know, there's the professors and there's this huge sea of administration. And at some of these universities, it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year in salaries. Do you think the universities should take a look at their annual, I'm not talking about the professors, but the administration, all this staff, should they look at that too and say to the federal government, look, we're going to take a look at our billion-dollar budgets at our universities, in some case multi-billion-dollar budgets. We're going to get some of our house in order here, and then we'd like you to fund these. What do you think? You must talk about this.
Well, this is university funding is a provincial jurisdiction. I cannot talk about all provinces, but in Quebec,
dependent on.
Oui, tout à fait.
what I want to say is that in Quebec, between 2012 and 2015, there has been cuts in university budgets. And a lot of cleanup has been done.
That's an administration budget.
Il y a eu des...
There has been cuts in the Quebec university budget because universities in Quebec are facing precarious financial situations, and that is also the same case in many Canadian universities.
How much time's left?
31 seconds.
Well, in all the good sport, I'll donate that to my colleagues in the Bloc and the NDP. How about that for collegiality?
Teamwork. Now moving on to the second MP for this round, we have MP Salsa for 6 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, all three of you, for being here discussing this important issue. And the motions have been forward, recognizing the challenges that you've all reaffirmed. You know, there's lack of funding. There's a desire to see the research, the importance, and you reference, Mr. Philippe, about this government's desire to improve our whole capacity around research and to ensure that we're competitive worldwide and to ensure that we attract the best and the brightest and retain them here as well. And that's obviously a theme that we're recognizing, so we want to discuss it. We want to elaborate how we can produce better results. And I take some caution in the question that just was received. We also have to redirect our funding in an effective way so as to manage it fiscally, so that we can ensure that we're appropriating dollars effectively. Cynthia, I can't pronounce your last name, I'm sorry. Are we attracting more foreign students? Is there a desire to come to Canada? Are you 3% being the number right now? Mm-hmm. Is that still holding strong?
You need to understand that over the course of the past few decades, the graduate studies landscape changed a lot. Currently, a lot of students are international students, and they all want to come to Canada. But once they arrive in Canada, they are facing issues, and these issues are not the same issues as the ones faced by Canadian students. And these issues are not taken into consideration in the current scholarship systems.
I recognize that our education system is somewhat of an economic basis for entry into Canada, and we are a strongly sought-after jurisdiction because of our education, because of our ability to provide great academic excellence, and it attracts foreign students who pay the lion's share of tuition and enablement to come here. So it's also a benefit to the universities, right? So we want to continue to strengthen that. Mr. Philippe, I want to build up on some of what my colleague has referenced here in terms of the funding. So what is, I'm interested in that number. I really do want to know, like, some of your recommendations is we need to increase the number of applications that are requested, and then we need to increase the value of some of those scholarships. How much more are we looking for? How much more are you proposing? And then the valuation.
Yeah.
When it comes to total value, I do not know right now. Earlier, I was talking about adjusting the value of individual scholarships that have not changed for the past 20 years. There's a very simple tool that you can use, and that is a tool of the Bank of Canada that allows you to calculate the value of a dollar at that time and to see the value of that dollar today. So I ask you all to look at that website. $20,000 in the year 2000 is now worth around $35,000. So I believe all three funding agencies already have simulation tools, I assume, and I believe it will be interesting to ask them what are the scenarios that they have in order to increase the value of scholarships and to meet the needs of graduate students in Canada.
So to build on that issue, you're requesting greater value on the individual scholarships and the individual ability to, because of issues of mental health and ability to stand up to the CPI and the cost of living that's happening. But what about the actual number of scholarships? I mean, by increasing the number of scholarships and increasing the value, we're asking a tremendous amount. So I think it's important for us to understand what you would like.
I want both. We want the amount, and we want the amount of scholarships emitted and the value provided as well. So we want more scholarships to be provided to graduate students, and we want a simulation that studies how we can rectify a situation that caused researchers to live in poverty for many years. Who today would be okay with not seeing a salary increase for 25 years? Who would accept that? Who would be okay with seeing their salary stagnate for 20 years? No one. No one would be okay with that. So you ask for precise numbers. Well, I want to say that there are three funding agencies with a lot of employees, and they should be able to provide you with different scenarios if you ask for them. And they should be able to provide you with studies on the impact of the increase of the value and the number of scholarships. As a representative of my organization that wants to promote graduate studies, I just want to say that if we want to continue what we're doing, and if we want to solve the issues facing Canada, increasing the number of graduate students and to make sure that they are well treated will be a good way to solve some problems. When it comes to the final cost, I ask you to ask your agencies.
Chair?
4 seconds, 3 seconds.
Sorry, Sebastian, I was going to ask you actually Ben's question to you, but I don't know if we have any time.
No, we're over
now. Okay. So moving on to the next member we have from the block, MP Lemire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say that that if we add 2 minutes, I have 20 seconds behind, and I'm talking about this because this will have impacts on our witnesses. With that being said, another issue related to underfunding of research is the global underfunding of research. Let's start with you, Mr. Bélanger. Recently, Radio-Canada published a report about the funding of the past 30 years, and they came up with 2 conclusions. First, the English research receives the lion's share of research funding, whereas research in French has decreased. Usually, grant applications in French are rejected. English receives the lion's share of funding. That is worrying. Do you believe that more money should be earmarked for Quebec research, and that the minister needs to directly intervene in order to increase the amount of funding for French. I need to look at the details of the investigation. I know that a lot of Francophone students and researchers choose to submit English requests because they know that they will be better considered. Now, does that mean they work in English? I am not sure. Because I did not look at the investigation in any detail, I cannot talk more about this today. When it comes to the position of science in French, this is not a new issue. English is the scientific language used around the world. Whether if you go to Germany or Sweden, the labs often work in English. Your question is difficult to answer because I did not look at this investigation.
So I think the possibility of creating a multidisciplinary journal that is French, would it be good for the federal government to invest in that kind of thing so that there could be an international and national sort of outreach on the part of Francophone researchers? Answer. Yes, I think that anything that contributes to promoting science in French is a good thing, and it's certainly something that we would support. When it comes to my organization, I can tell you that my association is a bilingual one that is more and more creating space for the French language at our annual conventions, for example. But I do think that a scientific journal that is in French and that is multidisciplinary would be a good thing. It's important to remember that the French language can also be an issue when it comes to spreading the word about scientific innovations or research. If there is a scientist, a physician, or not a physician, but in physics, for example, who wants to publish his work, well, he worries that if he publishes in French, then he won't get the word out. Question. So there's also a huge amount that has to be earmarked for the translation of scientific work. So there's Serge Bayet, who has explained that the revenue from the NRC research grants withdrew the abstracts in French for publication since 2012, which is actually contributing to making the issue a unilingual English issue. So I wonder if there is a direct link between the 20,000 that has not been indexed and the consequences that this has for all students, particularly at the doctoral level. They have to face challenges like isolation, pressure to publish, depression, and economic stress. So what is the impact that that has on their mental health and on the continuation of their studies? Answer. So the research by the University of Montreal that I mentioned earlier states that there is a direct link between financial precarity and mental health issues. And we know that there is a mental health crisis among post-secondary students. And to me, it is clear that by confining those students in a situation of economic precarity because the grants and the scholarships have not been indexed in 20 years, that is directly connected to increasing their mental health problems. So yes, my spouse is a doctoral student at Laval, so I know that it is very difficult to continue studies at times, but I would like to hear you about what is done to assist people who are in psychological distress because of grant underfunding. Answer. Well, after the pandemic, we realized that students' problems with mental health are very significant. So we look at 58% of students who are suffering from that. And I know that there is a direct connection between the living condition that is linked to the money that they receive and their general mental health. They have consequences on each other. They're interlinked. So really, when we want to improve students' mental health, we know that university programs are overloaded. So if I think about the Université Laval in particular, there are services for students, but there's a huge waiting list, and the needs of students are not being met. So really, after the pandemic, we see that there has been an increase in isolation. There's less teamwork as well. And so that has its impacts, and we have to start addressing that. And the way to do that is to start by increasing funding. Yes.
For the final 6-minute spot.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start with Monsieur Bélanger. On Monday here, we had a walkout of graduate students across the country, thousands of them here in Ottawa, that showed up on Parliament Hill. On Tuesday, we had Science Meets Parliament. I don't know if that was a coincidence or what, but we had top young researchers here on Parliament Hill. We had a reception, I think, just literally there, with people like Dr. Mona Niemer, the Canada Science Advisor, Frédéric Bélanger, who chaired and wrote the report on the Canadian research ecosystem. That the report was put forward by this government. And I talked to all of them, and there was just a general consensus that this question of increasing the funding of postgraduate students was such low-hanging fruit, such an obvious thing. Everybody was shocked that nothing had been done in the budget. When I look at Dr. Bouchard's report and the U15 budget asks, they were more or less the same. They wanted an increase of 10% per year for the next 5 years for research funding in Canadian universities, 5% per year for the next 5 years after that. And that was just to catch up to the United States and other countries. We talk about, this is a lot of money. Well, we are falling behind, and this is the information world where we have to make these investments or Canada would be left as a backwater in the world. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on those reports, Dr. Bouchard's report and the U15 asks, what the grad students are asking, and just put it in context with what's happening in the United States. Finland was mentioned.
The position of the association is very, very clear, and we published a communiqué after the 2023 budget came out that is in line with the Bouchard report, and that follows on the criticism in the U15 and the ACFAS, the Francophone Association for Knowledge. So it is significant that you were mentioning this, and really the solution is fairly simple. It is to increase the value of scholarships, because I asked the question earlier, who would accept to have their salary frozen for 25 years? No one. So that's fairly simple. But when it comes to international competition, absolutely. There's the United States, there's Germany, there's Sweden and European countries that offer higher grants and scholarships, and Canada is in competition with those countries. And so what worries me more than the Canadian university system really is the well-being of the students who are here in Canada and with whom we have the moral imperative to provide the best study conditions possible. And I think that to freeze their income for 25 years is a failure. It is a moral failure. We are not supporting the young people who want to obtain an education that will develop Canada in the future.
To turn to Ms. Mbuya Benge, and you mentioned the fact that postdoctorate scholarships, fellowships don't match up with, if that person with a doctoral degree, these are very highly trained people, could go into the marketplace and get a job in industry, and what they would be paid there versus what they're being paid at a postdoc. Can you just elaborate on that, what that difference would look like?
Le salaire moyen.
The average salary for a starting postdoc is about $70,000. The postdoc scholarships are not for all postdoc positions. Only some postdocs get those scholarships, and the salary that are provided, and they're covered by collective agreements, range from under the minimum wage. So that's the minimum that certain postdocs get as a salary. So there's a huge gap. There are people who have trained themselves, who went and got a PhD and have studied and are contributing astronomically to research in Canada, and they're paid under the minimum wage. And that has an impact on the attraction factor because people don't want to study for long periods of time if their salary doesn't match their skills. So that's the gap that has to be covered if we want to draw people here from abroad who produce knowledge in Canada, and if we want to keep people here in Canada, Canadian students, because there is a gap between Canada and other countries that are active in research fields.
23 seconds. Well, I'll just add a comment to that. I was just talking with biomedical researchers before I came to this meeting, and one of them gave an example of one of his students who went, left Canada and went to the University of Arkansas to do a postdoc because of not only the amount of money he would be getting, but the consistency of that funding over the years. And he said it was just not comparable at all to what he would get in Canada. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cannings. Moving on to the next round, 5-minute round, we have MP Mazer.
Thank you for coming out here. Mr. Belanger, I'm fascinated with all the different subjects you've talked on here, especially when it comes to the funding mechanism. You keep on, and the exchange you had with Mr. Lobb, we talked about, here we need the government to increase these rates, but yet the funding has increased to the universities, quite obviously, right? But when a professor or when a researcher gets the funding, so let's say he gets $1 million for that funding, in the application, does it say you have to pay $17,500? Like that's it to this postdoc or to this master's student, for example? Like, what is stopping the researcher from actually paying that student more?
Il y a aucune contrainte qui.
There is no constraint that prevents research for paying students and postdocs more. And it's very clear in most universities, professors can provide financial support at their discretion. So, of course, there are the federal granting agencies, but there are also professors who provide scholarships of sorts, but it's at the professor's discretion. But if the grants are not indexed either, then it's difficult for professors who get grants to use that amount that has been constant to follow the rate of indexation to ensure student incomes so that they follow the rate of inflation as well. So, and that's the case as well. So a grant, a $1 million grant in the year 2000 would now be worth far more at current year dollars. But it's the same amount that is provided now as was provided 20 years ago. So if a professor were to provide a greater share of a grant to students, well, then they would have to perhaps cut back on their research activities or not research on certain things or conduct research on certain things. So if scholarships are indexed, well, then research grants should also be indexed for our researchers and professors in universities.
I think that the balance needs to be much greater, and you hit a really good point there. Also, you talked about the funding, like, of course, the 2023 budget did not increase the funding at all amidst your several asks. How many years have you been asking for this increase to postgrads?
Du côté de l'Association canadienne des études supérieures.
So for the Canadian Association for Graduate Studies, we've been asking for an increase since 2017 in pre-budget consultations. So since 2017, we participated in the pre-budget consultations, and that's when we first asked for an increase.
Oui.
Yes.
Wasn't addressed this year.
Exactement.
That's right.
Money that's been spent. Interesting. Ms. Mai Bungay, you talked about when immigrants come in and they seem surprised, like they want to come to Canada, but then they're surprised, or they're taken aback. So what's the surprise? What is the most shocking thing they find when they come to Canada?
De l'aspect que j'ai.
So I'll talk about the members of my association, since it's their situation that I know best. But international students who arrive in Canada, well, not all of them are funded. Those who do have scholarships, we're talking about really the top students, whether they be Canadian students or foreign students, because there are some Canadian funds that go to foreign students, but it's really a tiny, tiny proportion. And so they are faced with a situation where they have to get used to a new education system, and also with regard to the support that they obtain. I can tell you that foreign students contribute extraordinarily to the Canadian education system, post-secondary education system, but they do not get the kind of support they need to be able to truly flourish here in Canada.
You mentioned in your comments before, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but they were surprised, like they don't have the supports, but obviously they were misled. They figure, or like they're surprised by something. So this is a federal, basically, application. And so where was the miscommunication? Where did they get misinformed, or why were they so surprised? Like whose responsibility is that? Is that the federal government?
I'm sorry, we're going to have this response for 12 seconds over, and we want to get to the 2.5-minute rounds without too much complaining from the members today. So moving on, we are going to the Liberals, MP Van Buyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to sit in on the discussions here today. I'd just like to put some things into context. We're making constant comparisons to what's being available in the United States. Just a cursory review has indicated that the cost of the average cost of a master's degree is between $20,000 to $30,000 a year, as compared to Canada of $17,000 a year. So I'd like to put that into context in terms of if we're using those comparisons, let's use those comparisons on both sides. The other thing as well is, just so that as a matter of record, we keep hearing nothing has been done in terms of supporting students in education. And in Budget 2023, there was $813 million that was committed to enhancing financial assistance to students. That includes student loan grants being increased by 40%. And in the previous budget, any repayment of student loans, if your income was less than $40,000, the repayment would not be required, and the maximum amount of repayment for a student to the student loan was reduced to 10% from 20% of their income. In addition to that, we did introduce as well $30,000 loan forgiveness for nurses and $60,000 in loan forgiveness for doctors. So I'd like to put this in the context of the overall support for education, and I acknowledge that this is not in the scope of this study, but I think this information should be a consideration as we go forward. And having said that, I will turn the balance of my time over to my colleague, Mr. Lauzon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the witnesses and for the records. I understand that Mr. Lemire was not here when we conducted the study on research in French, so there are a number of questions that were linked to research in French rather than funding. But Mr. Bélanger, you gave us an opening because you said that if there were funding directly provided by the universities, it would have to be done differently. So here we're talking about the funding system, and what would such a funding system look like if it were provided directly by the universities? Answer: I didn't say that I thought that that was the best thing to do and that it should be done, but I was talking about the cause and effect relationship with regard to the increase in the grants and whether they went right through the universities. But here there is another stage. So there are the granting agencies that are between the government and the universities and the students, of course. So I really am not saying anything about whether they should exist or not. So you do agree then with having those councils and to have the scholarships go through them? And the answer is yes, that's right, because I think there should be a distance maintained between the federal government and the councils. So really, the Canadian Association of Graduate Studies is not recommending that the councils be done away with. Question. So yes, I was just looking at the link between the study that we did on research in French and this study here. I wonder, because I was curious about something you said. You said that in other countries it's possible to study in French and to conduct research in French in Quebec, for example. But in the other study that we did, we were talking about publishing, because research is one thing and publishing is another. So perhaps Ms. Cynthia could answer this question as well. Are students prevented from conducting research in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada where studies can take place in French? Answer. There are many questions in your that you've just made. So I think that the main concern of Quebec universities and French-speaking or Francophone universities in general is to ensure that grant applications and scholarship applications that are submitted in French are properly assessed. And we have doubts about that because the committees are bilingual, but sometimes there are members of those committees that don't necessarily understand what is written in those. Inaudible. So it is important to have Francophone members of those grant and scholarship application assessment committees. Yes. Answers. So now when you talk about the language of research and the language of publication, it is an important distinction because you can be in a lab where the language is French, but then you publish your research in English. And the reason for that possibly is because we want to reach more countries in the G20 to be better included in the system. And so we publish in English rather than just in French so that there can be a better distribution of the publications themselves. So do you think that financially
trying to get that last round, make everyone happy. So moving on to the MP from the bloc, Lemire, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank my colleague, Mr. Collins, for having asked the question earlier, and also my other colleague who gave me an opening. I would like to add to what my colleague, Mr. Lauzon, said, because there has been research on the total funding. According to the Radio-Canada website, 68% of funding goes to English and 81% for another granting agency. And so really what happens is that there's a huge bias when it comes to funding research in English and not in French. And so if you look at Bill C-13 and the impact on English language research, it has an impact on the rights of French speakers and of Quebecers. So I would like to hear what you have to say about underfunding. What impact does underfunding have on the members of your association? Answer, I do not have specific data, but I can tell you that there was a survey during the pandemic where we were up to 64% of students who had mental health problems, university students. I don't know what the figure is for postdocs, but I can tell you for graduate students. And if you look at the funding, so those who are unionized, they have a salary between $33,000 and $48,000. That's what has to be paid to a postdoc. The researcher can pay more, but it doesn't necessarily have an incentive to do so. So when you look at the level of funding, you have to look at the project, because a professor gets funding, or a researcher gets funding, and if they don't deliver, well, then they don't get all of it. So if there's $130,000 to pay postdocs, well, will that professor decide to get 2 or 3 and then divide the money? And I think that really what the professor would prefer is to have 3 postdocs, pay each of them $40,000 out of his grant, and then perhaps have a greater chance of getting publications out of those postdocs. So really, it does have an impact. And of course, for the postdocs who are in that situation, of course it has an impact on their mental health, because usually at the postdoc level, you're trying perhaps to have a family. And if you're trying to raise a family on $40,000 a year, well, a number of postdocs come from abroad as well. They often come with their spouse, and that spouse, if they're from abroad, they don't necessarily find a job quickly. Sorry to interrupt.
To the last round of questions from MP Cannings for 2.5 minutes.
Well, merci, thank you. I'm going to continue with Monsieur Paquette. You mentioned that the postdoctoral fellowships and grants, the amounts, kind of set the standard for, this is the way I understood it, of what the researchers would pay if they were also paying their grad students, their postdocs. So the amount set by the tri-councils in their postdoctoral fellowships.
Effectivement.
So yes, when it comes to scholarships, the research councils have the amounts, but when it looks at postdocs, really it's the my tax at the federal level, and the $40,000 a year, that's the average rate, and $5,000 a year to buy materials. So there are scholarships that are higher. I have a colleague who got a scholarship of $53,000, and what he wasn't told when he got that scholarship is that there were the employer charges that would be deducted, which is from 13 to 20%, depending on the job. So he was under $45,000 a year, and he had been promised $53,000 as gross income. So that's something else that is a problem, because if it is not fully disclosed properly to the postdoc before they start their postdoc, well, then it becomes a problem. So really, what has to happen is that the scholarship has to be announced, and then perhaps add more so that the university can pay those charges without having to go back on their word.
You said some postdocs have to pay for the equipment, for the materials that they need.
Il y a une portion du montant qui est pris.
Yes, there's part of the amount that is for equipment. So my tax $40,000 for the salary and $5,000 for the equipment. But then if there is anything additional, often the professors will take that from the amount because they did not foresee an amount for that for the equipment for their project based on the scholarship that comes from the granting agency.
Thank you. Merci. Merci.
Thank you so much to our witnesses and members for their insightful questions. That concludes our committee for today. We will be meeting on Tuesday, May 9th to resume study of the Government of Canada's Graduate Scholarship and Postdoctoral Fellowship. It being now past the time of adjournment of 1 o'clock, this meeting now stands adjourned.
Merci à tous les traducteurs.
See you Tuesday.